Well, we will make a start so we can begin promptly. So, to our distinguished guests and participants, thank you so much for being here with us today. We're delighted to welcome you all to this special launch of the Bangladesh High Court Rights of Rivers verdict. My name is Rebecca Peters, and I'm a DPhil candidate working with Professor Robert Hope and the Reach Water team in Bangladesh. A recurring theme in the past 4 years that I've worked in Dhaka is the idea that Bangladesh is a riverine country. Nodi Matrik, a country born of her rivers. Perhaps best phrased in the natural poetry of Bangla language, Nodi bachle bachbedesh, firye ambo shonardesh. If you save the rivers, you will bring back golden Bangladesh. Indeed, rivers are precious to Bangladesh's culture, economy, and society, integrated into the country's history and touching every facet of life. Yet, despite government-mandated requirements for municipal management and wastewater treatment with the Environmental Conservation Act, and mounting directives from government to address the multi-layered challenges impacting water bodies, water quality has worsened throughout the river system, resulting in ecological harm and public health risks. As Bangladesh strives to deliver on national aspirations to accelerate industrialization and attain the Sustainable Development Goals, both government and industries contend with falling groundwater levels, domestic demand for pollution abatement, and uneven pressure for environmental compliance from international brands that source from Bangladesh-based factories. Due to uneven zoning, riverbanks are home to both informal settlements as well as industrial clusters. Consequently, many of the immediate environmental burdens of pollution are borne by low-income residents, while polluters benefit from self-seeking behavior at the cost of others. The interconnected problems impacting rivers point to the importance of collective action to address collective problems. Every actor across government, industry, and society has a role to play in restoring and protecting river systems. The ongoing struggle suggests that law is not enough. A widespread commitment to enact law and practice rule of law is essential to turn words on a page into actions in reality. Today, we will hear from key figures on this issue as we discuss the implications of this landmark High Court verdict. As we prepare to begin what is sure to be a fascinating conversation, we wish to acknowledge the wider team that allowed this work to happen. With the REACH program, we thank Ms. Alice Chatwal and the REACH Bangladesh country partners with Buit, Dhaka University, UNICEF, and many more for their ongoing support. We also wish to acknowledge the UK Research Innovation Strategic Priorities Fund, the FCDO, and the Chowdhury Center for Bangladesh Studies at UC Berkeley for co-sponsoring this event. We would like to express our gratitude to the High Court, particularly Justice Ashraful Kamal, for taking the time to review and approve this translation. And of course, our sincere thanks to our distinguished speakers here with us today. I'll now invite the leader of our translation team, Mr. Mohammed Gholam Sarwar, a lecturer at Dhaka University Law Department, to offer us some remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Your Excellencies, distinguished panelists, speakers, and respected audiences. Good afternoon from Dhaka. This is my extreme pleasure to welcome you all in this launching event. Myself, Mohammed Gholam Sarwar, teaching law at the University of Dhaka and worked as a consultant for Oxford to translate this judgment. I am honored and privileged to accomplish this task of translation of a historic and landmark judgment awarded by the Supreme Court of Bangladesh that declares river as living entity. It was basically the idea of Rebecca Peters, with the support of Oxford, to make a bilingual translation in order to disseminate the verdict to a wider and global audiences. Regarding the background and reflection on the translation, I would like to add that the task was rigorous but gratifying, as I have learned the significance of river from diverse perspectives, including historical, economic, political, and cultural aspects of river. The first part of the judgment described the statement of the case that reveals the vicious circle of river encroachment in Bangladesh. The judgment narrates the origins of rivers in Bangladesh and also addresses the Eurocentric and Oriental outlook on rivers. The judgment has also a literary perspective that portrays the affinity of Bangladesh with rivers and reminds us again with the connection of river with our very existence. To my understanding, the judgment reflects few critical issues that deserves to be addressed for the conservation of river. First of all, in addition to recognition of legal personhood to rivers, there is an indication of legislative reform from the directions of the judgment. It declares river encroachment and river pollution as criminal offenses and also recommends to impose strict penalties for the offenses. So there is a need for amendments or adapting a comprehensive law for rivers which would incorporate the directions of the judgment as was done in the Wanganui River in New Zealand. Secondly, the judgment identifies the implementing stakeholders, particularly the National River Conservation Commission, which is recognized as a legal guardian for the conservation and preservation of rivers in Bangladesh. The judgment also refers to ensure accountability of the relevant stakeholders. Finally, I would like to add that the judgment underscores the spirit of the ecocentric perception of environment, which calls for interdependent relationship of human being with nature, including river. And the judgment disregards the anthropocentric perception of environment, which justify exploitation of river for the sake of human interest. The judgment also obligates the state as a trustee for the conservation of rivers and refer the famous letter of Chief Seattle on environment, which goes on that the rivers are our brothers, and you must give the kindness to the rivers which you would give to any brother. To conclude, I would like to thank Ms. Rebecca Peters and Professor Robert Hope, University of Oxford, for their extensive support and cooperation to finish this task and making it published. I would like to express sincere gratitude to the partners and panelists of today's program. Last but not the least, I'm thankful to my translation team that includes Imtiaz Ahmed, Tahsin Lubaba, Safia Tazreed, Wasitami, Noor Hussein, and Tanveer Ahmed. We are looking forward to hearing your valuable insights about the rights of rivers, and we believe your guidance will lead us for the implementation of the directions of the judgment. Thank you so much for hearing me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Professor. If I may now please hand over to Professor Robert Hope with the University of Oxford to make some remarks.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. I mean, I think it's a landmark occasion, as we've mentioned, and the University of Oxford is delighted to be part of this celebration of this important legal document. I just want to say a couple of words at this point to touch on three things. One, Rebecca's mentioned the REACH program, just to give a few words on that work, and particularly in the context of Bangladesh. Secondly, to elaborate a little bit on the scientific work that we're doing in partnership with the government of Bangladesh, looking at river water quality, which I think will have linkages with the legal processes that Dr. Sawar has just illustrated it for us. And then thirdly, to introduce Her Excellency, the High Commissioner from Bangladesh, that we're delighted to have with us today. So briefly on the REACH program, it's a program of work funded by the UK Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office to improve water security with 10 million people in Africa and Asia. It's very much focused at the marginalized and those most in need, and it runs until 2024. The work that began in 2015, and Bangladesh has been one of the three priority countries that we've been working in addition to Ethiopia and Kenya. The University of Oxford leads this program of work, and it's very much a science and practitioner partnership. So we have very close relationships in Bangladesh with the leading universities, BUID, Dhaka University, ICDDRB, and we also work with UNICEF and government partners. And we've been delighted with the cooperation we've had from the Prime Minister's Office and the Chief Coordinator for SDG Affairs through the Department of Environment and many of the other actors in government, which we value greatly. So that's a few words on REACH and the global perspective. In terms of our work in Dhaka, the work that we've been looking at primarily is looking at river water security. And as the panel know, and you see the images in front of you today, there are significant challenges, as there are in many other countries, in terms of addressing river water security. Our work in partnership with government and academic actors has been looking at river water quality issues. It's a very complex hydrological system. There are multiple rivers that flow in multiple directions, and it's often very difficult to understand the causes and consequences of water quality risks within the system. So we've been working in cooperation to try and have a systemic understanding of those river water quality risks and in addition to understand what the social implications of that, who are under most risk as a consequence of that, to try and guide policy and interventions into the future. So this is ongoing work that we've been doing for a number of years now, and it also includes developing technologies to try and understand toxicity within the river. So there's biosensor technology that we've been developing and testing in partnership with both government and industry, so we can have very quick and immediate understanding of where water quality issues arise. And as I've sort of said, a key part of this is to try and understand who is interacting with the rivers, who is at most risk, so we can take early and preventative action. And as you can see here, many people have a close interaction with the river. And for the audience who's not familiar with the context, this can be both in terms of productive uses in terms of people's lives and their livelihoods, but also in terms of people playing, and you'll see children interacting with the river here as well. So it's a very complex issue, and a whole set of issues emerge from that. And we are supporting the government as we go forward. And this is wider sort of international linkages as well. There are sectors of the Bangladesh economy, as we are aware, with the ready-made garment industry, that has international linkages. So within the UK, for example, Rebecca and I are sort of engaged with some of the work that the UK Environment Bill is taking forward, and issues such as producer responsibility. So where you have retailers or manufacturers based in the UK, Europe, or North America that have links in, what is the shared responsibilities for managing these sort of processes going forward. So this documentation, this legal instrument that we see before us, has a much wider set of issues that, you know, Rebecca in particular has been looking into. So those are the issues in brief, and I think, you know, the work that we see today is a landmark, as I've mentioned, in terms of rivers reflecting the choices that society make and how we can improve that. And today we see that rivers now have a voice in this process, which is a significant improvement, we think. So the University of Oxford and the REACH programme are delighted to be part of this process and play a small role within this as we go forward. And so I will conclude here by introducing and thanking greatly Her Excellency, the High Commissioner for Bangladesh, Sayeeda Muna Tasneem, for joining us today. We are very grateful for her time in joining this process, and we welcome her words. Handing back to you, Rebecca.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, we are so pleased to welcome Her Excellency, the High Commissioner, to offer us some remarks and to formally open our event today, to offer us some comments and some perspective on the value and importance of Bangladesh and the UK's ongoing close relationship. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. I apologize. I believe you're on mute. I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Good morning to everyone. I do apologize for joining in late. Thank you, Rebecca, particularly you for inviting me here, because I received this invitation through Maya Rizvi, your friend, and otherwise I wouldn't have been able to, get involved in this process. But I'd like to first, pay a tribute to everyone who has been involved in the bilingual translation and of the Rights of the Rivers verdict of Bangladesh courts from last year. And I would like to also pay a tribute to Honorable Justice Ashraful Kamal. I don't know if he's joined us today, but it's a great honor to be with you, sir, in the same platform. So, tributes to everyone. Thank you to everyone, who's been involved in this process in getting such a historic or extraordinary sort of a landmark decision where, I saw in your paper that only New Zealand and India had done it for one or two rivers. For Bangladesh is for all rivers. So, giving this particular right to the river as a person, legal personhood is extraordinary. And I think it'll go a long way in international implications and jurisprudence in particular when it comes to international law and respecting the river. So, also at the same time, we are in a very, as you organize this event, while reflecting in Bangladeshi bilateral relations. And of course, we have a vast relationship, their economic and others, but I'd like to particularly focus on, the cooperation we have in terms of climate change and environment. In that perspective, as you know, today is a very historic time because just yesterday, the US President-elect, President Joe Biden, he has declared already that US will be joining back in the Paris Agreement, where it pulled out 2 years ago. And as we are at a time when United Kingdom is is already the looking for a very ambitious COP26, where they want net zero by 2050, and at the same time they Prime Minister Boris Johnson has invited Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina to this Ambition Summit. I don't know if you're aware, on 12 December, there's going to be an Ambition Summit where leaders are supposed to put in very ambitious plans and NDCs and adaptation as well. So adaptation has been included in the ambitions, which is great news for Bangladesh. And at the same time, from our perspective, Honorable Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has just assumed the presidency of the 48-member Climate Vulnerable Forum. And in that forum, as you know, it's a forum of the most vulnerable countries who are facing an existential threat and will go underwater along with all its rivers, by the way. So, this is a very important time where Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina has hosted the Climate Vulnerable Summit, the virtual one, where she too, all the CVF leaders has put a very ambitious deadline it's called the 31st December 2020 Midnight Declaration Pledge. All the particularly G20 countries who are doing more than 80% of the carbon emissions in this in the world have to make ambitious declaration by 31st December. So I think from both ends of the spectrum, the climate vulnerable countries, the biggest emitters, and the countries like Bangladesh, which are suffering the biggest brunt of this global sea level rise, are both speaking out. Bangladesh Prime Minister has been a great advocate, climate advocate, and she is she just inaugurated the Global Center for Adaptation. It's a Netherlands-based institution where Kofi Annan also co-hosts, and we just started hosting the South Asian Regional Center for GCA, which would be looking into ambitious policies and action plans for building more resilience and adaptation to climate change in our region. And as you're aware that also, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is a member of the high-level panel on water of the UN Secretary General. So she has always been an advocate of water. And in 2018, she adopted the Bangladesh water rules. It was not there. So I think over the last few years, with this particular historic verdict coming out, is coinciding with a time when there's great political commitment of saving the rivers. From encroachment, from pollution, and the penalties in this particular verdict I've seen is very stringent for the industrial sector, where you have you can't have access to loan, where et cetera, you can't run for public office. So it's a very stringent. I don't think that it's probably setting an example for the rest of the world. So from that perspective, the commitment is very strong to preserve the rivers. But I would like to reflect a little bit, that where UK can come in. Before that, you have to understand that, at this point, I would like to pay a tribute to our father of the nation, because we, who had set up the Joint River Commission with India in 1972, as early as that, because our rivers, we're a lower riparian country, we're a lower riparian country. So it could be most of the rivers, one river is coming from China and then India and then to Bangladesh, and rest of them, most of them, 57 rivers are originated in India, in the Himalayan foothills. And the mighty rivers that we call, Ganges, Brahmaputra, and the Meghna, the GBM basin, that also we should be doing joint river basin management with India. So a lot depends on our, the water connectivity with India, the river connectivity. So, the reason I paid a tribute to Father of the Nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, because this is his centenary, and we pay tribute to him because he had the vision to create that Joint River Commission and the Bangladesh Water Development Board in 1972. So these really helped in shaping how important rivers are. So, Bangladesh's civilization, we were part of the Ganga Ridai civilization, which was based on the Ganges Bengal river system. And we were always historically the largest delta in the world. It used to be a prosperous delta. It still is a prosperous delta last year Bangladesh was enjoying the highest growth in Asia, 8.13%. And, a lot actually is because of our riverine system. So it has its pros and cons. So every year we suffer from these natural disasters, but then again, we have a very prosperous possibility based on rivers. But our rivers need continuous dredging. We currently, the government, Bangabandhu had collected 7 dredgers, then Prime Minister had bought 14. This time, in last 10 years, I think she's procured 66 dredgers, and she plans to buy 80 more dredgers, because you have to continuously dredge the rivers, because so much siltation is coming in and then there are, barrages and artificial obstacles to normal flow of the rivers. And there, I think in terms of our cooperation with India has been phenomenal, because in 2011, we signed after the Ganges Treaty that was signed in 1996 with India. It also had an additional agreement to sign in 2011, but just last year, we signed the Inland Water Protocol with India. And in fact, I think just yesterday, it was 11 November, the first inland water commercial transaction and transportation took place between Bangladesh and India. So it was quite a historic day yesterday as well in our joint river system of 57 rivers. And by the way, we have 800 rivers in Bangladesh, or probably more, and different tributaries. So from that perspective, when it comes to our bilateral cooperation with United Kingdom, as you know that, United Kingdom, we have trade relationship of $4.3 billion US. We have British Bangladeshi community diaspora here. They're sending about 1.3 billion US dollars as remittance. And then there's British investment in Bangladesh, about 2 billion. So, we have this 9 billion portfolio, but, the bilateral development cooperation is small. It's about 200 million. And where, the government probably takes, the money or the technical cooperation doing with the government is less than 8%. The rest is 50% is currently given to Rohingya humanitarian support, and rest of it is given to the NGOs. And we really, really appreciate that United Kingdom is working with many NGOs on certain areas. But what I would like to emphasize here is particularly Professor just spoke before me. And currently, even last year in 2019, we saw that UK's allocation in that 200 million or 180 million, 2% was allocated to climate change. And I'm sure they're working with certain NGOs, but I think that it should go up to more than 15%. So if we actually have to meaningfully cooperate as COP26 presidency and CVF presidency, or as a country that is in the 5th highest global climate risk index list, the cooperation has to enhance much, much further. In that context, I would like to recall the water, this year's summit on the World Water Day, where Water and Climate Change Summit was hosted by His Royal Highness Prince Charles, where he's been the chair of WaterAid, I think, since 1991. And we are in communication with his British Asian Trust, and we are trying to do this climate-based nature solutions. So those are like small projects that we're doing. But I think the extent of bilateral cooperation in river management, in dredging, and currently Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is, she's doing this 500-meter coastal belt, greening of the coastal belt to build resilience. So I think adaptation and resilience is one area that definitely United Kingdom should be supporting Bangladesh. She has created this $400 million US climate trust fund. So we're probably the only LDC who has created this trust fund from our own resources. But what we need is, kind of expertise for building resilience in the coastal areas, in particular, preserving the Sundarbans. So we're in a dialogue with FCDO Minister Lord Ahmed, where, UK is particularly interested to look into the Sundarbans and its preservation, which is part of the, again, Bangladesh-India joint heritage. And at the same time, river management is extremely important when it comes to regulatory frameworks, such as, we have very currently strong regulatory frameworks in encroachment with this particular verdict. But at the same time, when it comes to, the coastal area and the delta management, when it comes to looking into greening of the coastal belt, particularly there, United Kingdom can have more investments in terms of social enterprise, something that is seriously looked into by the UK as well. So I would particularly like to say that, if this COP26 presidency and the CVF presidency, we are planning a number of events throughout the year of our two presidencies, and then it builds up to the COP26. And in the COP26, we'll have a summit level meeting where this, but throughout the year, the CVF countries and the climatically vulnerable countries would be demanding certain things, particularly climate financing. And, climate financing is something that for adaptation in particular, and then, of course, we want ambitious NDCs. For Bangladesh, we've already submitted our NDCs, 5% voluntarily and 15% with support, but we are willing to even increase it. One thing is extremely important is, apart from green financing and climate financing, we also need to look into renewable energies. I've seen that UK has interest in that area. However, as you know, Bangladesh is a very densely populated country. And for renewable solar energy in particular, you need large areas, and we don't have any areas to spare. But we are the largest solar home system country in the world. We have 4.5 million solar home systems, which are individual standalone solar home systems. There, the UK can also cooperate. But at this point, I think we need to have, with the DFID, we're looking into social forestation, coastal resilience building, preservation of the conservation of the Sundarbans, and of course, what do we do? So currently, the greatest emphasis has been given by Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina on the Delta Plan 2100, which is a comprehensive plan that looks into environmental conservation. It looks into water security. It looks into, and this was drafted with the Netherlands. As you know, Netherlands is a country that does diking, and it's actually under sea level water, and that's what we're expecting by 2050. So we've adopted this Delta Plan, and I think UK, if that is one plan, all the action plans under the Delta Plan, and the plans that we have to restore rivers by 2026. So it's a phase-wise plan under the Delta Plan that by 2023 we'll achieve so many rivers, we'll restore so many rivers. By 2026, we'll restore so many rivers. There in the Delta Plan, the United Kingdom definitely has a scope to give us more support. Now, I don't know whether it's going to be financial support, because in terms of financial support as a High Commissioner, I understand that it can support the NGOs to do certain coastal areas, but the government, I don't think the government is looking for any kind of financing, but collectively it's looking for climate financing. But in terms of, we have set up the GCA, it does require funds, the Global Center for Adaptation, and I've actually appealed to the UK government that it should become a partner. I think it has already. It is becoming an institutional partner to the Global Climate Adaptation Center that we have set up in Dhaka. So I think that's great cooperation. But we absolutely look forward that when this particular historic verdict will be, when it comes to the enforcement of the verdict, definitely we can do some sort of common strategy to save our rivers, because most of the developed countries in the United Kingdom, I've served in Thailand, they preserve their rivers. But in Bangladesh, Prime Minister is putting so much emphasis on Dhaka city and Chittagong city, so, conserving the 4 rivers that run through the cities, urbanization, these are the areas where actually we can do some advocacy, we can do some joint strategy, best practices. This is extremely important that we can learn from the United Kingdom. So I'm not too sure when it comes to climate financing, whether it's going to be something extremely ambitious. I don't think that's going to happen. But when it comes to advocacy, when it comes to small funds supporting the GCA, these are the practical areas where they can support. And thank you so much, for inviting me here. And, I understand that my brother, Shubhi Chaudhry, somewhere, I can't see him here, but is the University of Berkeley, that Chaudhry Center is also, he sent me a text the other day. So we are both from Chittagong, and, we have a river called Kornafuli in Chittagong. And currently, out of the 10 mega projects of this government, there is one called underwater, just like, there's an underwater tunnel. And we're very proud of being from Chittagong, but in terms of Bay of Bengal and the blue economy, it is intrinsically linked with the river system. So in terms of, Bay of Bengal and preservation of, cooperation with the UK, blue economy is an area where we are cooperating under the Commonwealth, where we are trying to do, mangrove is such a carbon sink. It's just an extraordinary kind of a, forest. And if we can have more mangrove around the coastal areas, that is one project that we want to do with the United Kingdom. We're trying to look at it under the Commonwealth, but I think bilaterally it can be an excellent project in terms of blue economy. Thank you. And all the best of luck to your research.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Your Excellency. We're so grateful for your presence here with us today and for taking the time to offer such thoughtful remarks as we begin this wonderful event. So thank you very much to you and to your commission for taking the time to be with us today. We're really thrilled to now share this pre-recorded remarks from Justice Ashraful Kamal, who is also with us today, I believe. So I will switch over to here so we can hear some thoughts from His Honor, the High Court Justice Ashraful Kamal.
My fellow speakers and distinguished panelists, thank you for being here today. I would first like to thank the Rich Water Security Program of the School of Geography and the Environment, University of Oxford, for organizing this event. In particular, I would like to thank Rebecca Peters, without whose initiative I do not think we would have this translation for the world to appreciate and learn from. She, along with her team of translation from Oxford and Dhaka University, have worked tirelessly to turn this translation into a reality. I wish her and the others all the best in life. My father was an assistant engineer in the what is known as LGED. He was posted at the Noakhali Paurasabha in 1966, where we stayed in our engineering bungalow until his transfer to Khulna in 1981. Within our compound there was a pond which was surrounded by a garden. I remember spending half my day swimming in the pond. It was my favorite part of the day. There was a huge marsh behind our compound where I used to fish and collect water lilies. To the south, there was a road beyond which was a lake. I used to walk with my friends by that lake every evening. Sometimes when we stayed back till night, we could see the mesmerizing reflection of the moonlight on the lake. To the north of our premises, there was a vast field, and we spent our days playing football and volleyball over there. But now, none of those places where I made such fond memories growing up, none of them exist. The pond, marsh, and lake have been filled up. Shops and buildings cover the fields. My grandfather had a big house with the 4 ponds surrounded by lots of vegetation. To the south there was a large marsh covering about 3 square kilometers. Today the whole scenario is different. The entire area has been urbanized without any breathing space left for the people living there. Due to the nature of my father's occupation, we traveled all across the country. I had the opportunity to visit numerous hills and forests and water bodies. Some of those scenic places do not exist anymore. Others have been great changes. It breaks my heart to see my beautiful Bangladesh changing in all the wrong ways. The Turak River case gave me scope to redress some of these pains. I know there are many like me who are worried seeing nature being eroded away. I believe my judgment will redress their worries to a great extent. I know we cannot regain our past, we cannot see the plants, ponds, canals and rivers in place as it was before. But it is a fact that we can save the planet from further destruction. The case of Turak River came to me when I was searching for ways to save the planet. When I was thinking to stop further damage of the environment. Once upon a time, Bangladesh was home to staggering approximate of 1300 rivers. Today, the country has merely 405 rivers listed officially. The rest have withered away over the years. Some have dried up due to climate change, while others have been exploited to the point of no return. The rest that remain are vulnerable to constant pollution and incessant encroachment by influential individuals of our society. And it is to be noted that this is a recurring theme throughout the world. The utopian laws were not enough to stop them, since they could jump through the legal loopholes and buy out the enforcers with money. Such problems exist around the world, be it in least development, developing and even developed nations. The laws alone have not been enough. The judiciary developed sophisticated tests and doctrines, but they have failed us only because the actors of justice, that is, policymakers, judges, and law enforcement agencies, could not pass the real test, the test of willingness to protect our water resources. The rivers and seas, forests and wildlife, hills and mountains, and the very air we breathe are crucial to mankind and for the sustainability of Mother Earth itself. None of these are created by man, nor shall they be governed by him. All that is on the earth belongs to and is governed by only one, nature itself. The law of nature is the supreme law of this earth, and the law enacted by any nation remotely repugnant to or inconsistent with the law of nature is void of nation. Nature is not bound to, nor does it need to be bound by the laws created by mankind. Rather, mankind is bound to abide by all the laws of nature indefinitely. In this judgment, which was published in, delivered in February 2019, it has been said, nature expects lawful behavior from mankind and it deserves it as well. This means that nature has a legal right to sustain itself. If we act unlawfully, which nature will not hold back when it retaliates. Nature will show its wrath, after which the end of mankind will be inevitable. Only a year later, we have come to see the immense power that nature has over our lives in the form of COVID-19. What cannot be seen with the naked eyes has the whole of mankind on its knees. This is not the first pandemic, nor will it be the last. If we have not learned our lesson by now, after 1 million lives have been lost and trillions of dollars gone to waste, we should brace ourselves for the worst. We must remember that being blind will not prevent our destruction. It will only leave us more vulnerable to it. Therefore, the 17 directions given in this judgment are essential to be adopted and implemented across the world. If we really care about our beloved earth, if we really care about our future generation and want them to enjoy a beautiful earth, then these 17 directions given in this judgment must be adopted. If done correctly, we shall definitely be able to conserve what is left to of our beautiful earth. These 17 directions are the baseline test of our willingness, from our intention to create a better world. The journey shall only begin from then on. Thank you very much.
With sincere thanks to the High Court and especially to His Honor Justice Ashraful Kamal for taking the time to make these remarks to share with us today. I'm now very pleased to introduce our distinguished panel. I'm just going to switch over now. Just a moment, please. Excellent. All right. So I have the distinct pleasure of having the opportunity to welcome today our chair and moderator of our discussion, Ms. Sharmeen Murshid from the National River Conservation Commission, NRCC Bangladesh, as well as the founder and chief executive of the NGO Broti. We're so grateful to welcome Advocate Manzil Murshid, President, Human Rights and Peace for Bangladesh, and the conducting lawyer of the case. We very much appreciate the presence of Mr. Mahfouz Anam, editor of the Daily Star, which published the article "Time to Declare the Turag River Dead," which is largely one of the keystone events that led to the case. We're very pleased to welcome Mr. Sharif Jamil, the General Secretary of BAPA, a Bangladesh-based CSO and activist who will be able to offer a really useful on-the-ground perspective. And of course, we're very appreciative of having Dr. Erin O'Donnell, University of Melbourne Law Department and water law expert here with us today. If I may now please invite Ms. Sharmeen Murshid to begin with our opening questions. Thank you. And Ms. Murshid, I believe you're on mute. Thank you. Oops.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is that all right? Yeah. Thank you very much, Rebecca, for that wonderful introduction and for the honor that you bestow upon me to conduct this part of the session. I'll go straight into business so that we don't lose time. And then as we go along, we can have our other observations. So I'll start off with Mahfouz Anam. I'd like to say that a single report in his very well-reputed daily, the Daily Star, on Turag had a profound impact in the creation of the court order 2019 and the impact it had on the public mind and how it led to a course of action, a legal course of action. So Mahfouz Anam, would you kindly tell us about your views on the role of the media, the role of journalism in covering environmental issues, particularly rivers, and in protecting them? Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you.
5 minutes.
are you,
I'm sorry. I'm going to monitor the time. 5 minutes.
Yes, please. I'm delighted to be a part of this process. I would like to thank Oxford University and particularly Rebecca for this initiative. Uh, Lady Star strongly believes in the importance of the environment, the relationship between human beings and nature. And in that field, we took up river as a, as if you like, as a particular issue to write about. We take great pride in the fact that we have been writing on rivers relentlessly for the last several years. And I will be frank to say that it has frustrated me immensely to see how the rivers have been neglected. I mean, in Bangladesh is one of the richest countries in terms of fresh water. This is a nature's gift, and I'm aghast to see how not only we waste it, we are destroying it. I mean, this is what prompted us to get into it. And to answer your question, I think media has a very important role, and we consider ourselves very fortunate that one of our reports triggered the whole other stakeholders, and especially the judiciary, to come up with this landmark judgment. But I would like to say that the rivers in Bangladesh are being destroyed by one is the encroachment of the river banks. Now, being a deltaic country, rivers are not very deep. They are spread out wide. And in the summer, in the rainy season, the rivers flow to its brim, but in the dry season, the rivers basically shrink. So, and there is a lot of land on the two sides, and these are encroached upon. They are taken over. So over the years, the what is called the river, the rights of the river in the land has been shrunk deeply. This is one. Secondly, reckless permission have been given to locate industries on river banks. Third, the city wastage, the sewage of the big cities, they are dumped on the rivers. Thirdly, industrial pollution is absolutely unmitigated. Industrial pollution is allowed to flow into the river. One particular case in point is the leather industry. We have a location in one part of Dhaka. We are now hearing for last 20 years about its relocation, and it has been relocated in a new area called Savar. And yet, after 20-25 years, that area has not been fully equipped with what we call the water treatment plant. And so what we now have is that the whole area having been polluted before, which has now been vacated, we have now relocated the leather industry in another area where they are polluting new rivers. I mean, one really cannot comprehend this situation. And finally, the river transport. We have literally hundreds and thousands of launch and steamers plying the river, and all their waste and even their used mobile, they are all dumped into the river. There is no way of collecting, their motor oil after being used. All we have now a legislation. We have very positive governmental policy. Government's intention is very clear, but we are faltering. Where we falter in many other areas is implementation. So it would be my great sort of wish that through this seminar, if some sort of a more active role is being played by the implementers, which basically is the government. The government has tremendous, its reach is tremendous. This government is very powerful, and it has very many big projects to its credit. But I would I'm sorry to say that as much attention as should be given to the rivers, which is our lifeline, it is like destroying ourselves. It is destroying the river is basically destroying our future. And given the fact that Bangladesh is a highly densely populated country, the relationship between man and river, societies and river, economy and the river is so interlinked, so intricately interlinked, that destroying the river is basically throttling the oxygen that we need in our body to live. So I would like to strongly appeal that whatever we can do together, and here the Daily Star stands committed, and I'm sure other newspapers and other media channels have the same awareness. So we would like to sort of collaborate and work.
Thank you. Thank you. Mahfuz Anam, thank you so much. Just like to say that the commission, as a member of the commission, the court order has had a profound impact on its workings. And as we go along, perhaps, we will know how it is being interpreted and how it is actually going into application. In fact, just so that you know, that right now, rule nisis are being actually placed against the commission. And I see that as a very positive side, all because of this court order. So may I invite Advocate Manzil Murshid, who actually took on this case. I'd like to ask him what made him take on this case and how did he win? What was his approach? Could he tell us about the approach he took?
Assalamu alaikum and very good day to all of you from Manjil Murshid, an advocate of the Muna Tasnim, the High Commission of Bangladesh in UK, His Excellency Professor Robert Hove, translation team Robert, Rebecca Peters and Muhammad Ghulam Sarwar, the Honorable Moderator Mrs. Sarmin Murshid, the distinguished panelists, renowned journalist Mahfuz Anam, river activist Sharif Jamal, Dr. Erin O'Donnell, participants around the globe, ladies and gentlemen. At first, I express my gratitude to the organizers of this launch event. I am also grateful for inviting me to deliver this speech. I appreciate the work of Rebecca Peters and Muhammad Ghulam Sarwar for publishing a historical Bengali judgment in English through Oxford University, UK. Dear moderator, Human Rights and Peace for Bangladesh is a leading organization in Bangladesh working since 2004 on the issues of protection of river, environment, archaeology, human rights, rule of law, fundamental rights, etc. As the president of the organization, I am conducting all the cases filed before the Supreme Court of Bangladesh and ensure all rights of the common people, obtaining court order by way of filing public interest litigation. Though HRPB is an NGO, but its specialty is not to receive any fund from anywhere in Bangladesh or abroad. However, in 2009, HRPB first obtained a judgment passed by Mr. Justice A.V.M. Khairul Haq in respect of 4 rivers around Dhaka city, in which one of the direction was given to form a National River Commission to protect the river. Thereafter, more than 65 PAL cases filed by HRPB to save river, canal and other water bodies and protect the same by way of Supreme Court order. Every time based on a media report, we are going to court since 2009, but encroachment and pollution of river are not satisfactorily reducing. The cause behind this is known to all. Some powerful, moneyed men, businessmen, and elected representatives are liable for major causes of pollution of river and encroachment. As our routine work, HRPB filed a case being writ petition number 13,989 of 2016, of which English translated judgment book is launching today. The petition was filed annexing a Daily Star report on the caption about to death of Turak River. Though there are many provisions of law in Bangladesh, such as the Natural Water Reservoir Conservation Act 2000, the Climate Change Trust Act 2010, the National River Conservation Commission Act 2013, the Water Act 2013, the Bangladesh Biodiversity Act 2017, etc., to protect river environment nature. But due to lack of implementation of law, the situation is every day degrading. So in order to save our river Turak, we took decision to file the case, in which ultimately judgment was passed in Bengali in giving 17 directions, declaring the living status entity of the river Turak and all rivers in Bangladesh. For the protection of rivers, HRPB filed many cases, including 4 rivers surrounding Dhaka city, Kornofuli River at Chittagong, Sandha River at Kirtonkhola, River at Borishal, Mahananda at Chapainababganj, Kopotokho at Jeshore, Meghna at Brahmanbaria, Mukteshwari at Jeshore, Gomoti at Kumilla, Moyur at Khulna, Dholeshwari at Manikganj, etc. In all those cases, due to the intervention of the judiciary, thousands of illegal occupants and encroachers were evicted from the river beds to save the rivers and protection of human rights as well. In 2009, the High Court Division in its judgment recognized the Turag River as a living entity with legal rights, and it further held that the same would apply to all rivers of Bangladesh. The court ordered the National River Protection Commission to serve as the guardian for all the rivers of Bangladesh. That the Apex Court of Bangladesh upheld most of the direction of the judgment in a separate appeal case in 2020. This intervention by the judiciary made Bangladesh a champion in the world in case of protection of river, as well as environment of the protection of human rights and its existence. Dear moderator, though in many cases we obtained judgment and direction to protect river, environment and nature, but implementation was not satisfactory. For last 11 years, the effort of HRPB could not reach in fulfilling target. We have filed the writ petition to evict the encroacher, and at the same time, there was no prayer about legal entity of river. At the time of hearing, Honorable Justice Mr. Ashraful Kabal put a question upon me that how long I will fight to protect river and nature. What will be the next situation when I will be no more? He also asked to submit the way of permanent solution of it. Then I have submitted about the case of India, in which a judgment was passed declaring the legal entity of river. In my submission, I was also mentioned about a seminar held before few days ago within the river Buriganga in presence of Minister of Inland Water Transport Ministry, organized by Nongor. In seminar, several speakers requested to take steps about legal entity of river, and I also assured them to place it before the court in appropriate case. At the time of hearing, I took the opportunity and argued the case in that line. But all credit goes upon the honorable judges who delivered the judgment. Especially the author judge contributed a lot, giving reference to the law and judgment passed in different countries in respect of protection of river. Dear moderator, I was confident about the outcome of the case because of my experience and filing of conducting more than 300 public interest litigation cases before the Supreme Court of Bangladesh, in which more than 100 final judgment of
5 minutes are over, Advocate Murshid.
except one Sundarban mangrove case. Because in the meantime, River Commission made a list of 50,000 enclosure and published in. Judgment has been appreciated by all the people, and there is a consensus. But due to language, it could not be reached to the foreigners. By your 2 days effort, it will reach in all over the world, and many of them be benefited. Lastly, I congratulate all of you for the invitation. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I hate to push this. This is so important and so very interesting. But we'll make an extra attempt to stay within time. I will now invite Sharif Jamil to speak from his experience as an activist, a man on the ground. Can you tell us about some of the interpretations and applications of the verdict that you experience or find in your work?
Very good afternoon from Bangladesh and good morning there in the UK. Thank you, Honorable Chair, distinguished panelists, speakers, and the participants of this very important webinar today. I'm also delighted, like the other speakers, to be a part of it. And I'm also very happy to be able to join you from a river, and I'm right on the river. Anyway, rivers are very, very crucial to protect the planet. We all know it very well. But when we say rivers are living entity, then what does it mean by? Living entity for rivers are not similar for every places. It depends on the geographical location. The rivers in the hills are different. The rivers in the plain land are different. The rivers in close to the coast are different. And as a lowest riparian country in the Ganges, Brahmaputra and Meghna basin, Bangladeshi rivers also have very unique structural definition when you say them as a living entity. We know it does have four components and integral organs, which are the riverbed, the foreshore, the riverbank, and the floodplain. If we do not understand these four parts properly, and if we cannot integrate those and protect those in terms of protection, then we cannot protect our rivers. What we experienced from the activism we did, this is not the only verdict or historical verdict that put some efforts to protect our river. There are many other verdicts, and there were a lot of court directives regarding protection of rivers from tannery pollution that was really properly addressed by Honorable Mahfouz Anam. But what we saw regarding the verdicts came in terms of protecting the river's structure. In 2009, there was another one historical verdict from High Court, and it instructed the government how to protect the Dhaka rivers. And they asked government to demarcate the river area first, and then to evict the encroachments, and then to protect the river area by construction of greeneries or walkways. And that verdict also instructed government to form river commission, because a lot of other ministries and departments are responsible to take care of rivers. We need coordination and cooperation, and that's why it was a very, very historical verdict to the river advocates and activists across the country. But what we saw, the faulty demarcation of rivers actually killed all the rivers around Dhaka. The faulty demarcation led the foreshore, the riverbank, and floodplain all to be grabbed, as it was mentioned by the Honorable Editor of Daily Star. So when a verdict or when an instruction, which was actually referred, some of those are referred by Her Excellency Honorable Ambassador, when the Prime Minister's instruction and when the court verdicts are not implemented properly, then those are not bad. Those reveals as worst what we witnessed regarding the rivers around Dhaka. The river I am right now on, called Andharmanik River, it is a very unique river in Bangladesh because it is baby English sanctuary. And if we know, very close proximity of the river is a Paira area. There is a port coming up, and more than 9,000 megawatt of electricity are planned to be produced from coal from here. So when you are setting up huge coal hub close to a very unique river in this country, which is very important for the economy and fish resources, then it doesn't make much sense. She rightly pointed out that the government and the entire globe needs Sundarbans to be protected. But when you are allowing reckless industrialization around Rampal, Mongla, Borguna, Patuakhali, then it doesn't make any sense. Well, it is rightly pointed out that we need to dredge our river and we need dredgers. But when the dredging are itself killing the rivers, then the dredger doesn't make any sense. You are dredging the riverbed and disconnecting the river from the connecting other canals and small rivers in the fish breeding centers. So we need to change our approach. We need to change our mindset. And we need to remember that Rhine Delta and Ganges Delta are very different in character. So we need to manage our rivers, as the Prime Minister is saying over and again, that we need to learn how to live with rivers. We need to learn how to live with seas. But the Delta Plan 2100 actually came up with some projects. Those are all cordon approach and all are putting up commercial approach. We need to change it. We need to go for open approach. We need to actually implement the court verdict properly. And that's why from civil society, we decided to form an alliance just to focusing on implementation of the court verdicts, because we experienced some bitter truth in reality. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Sharif Jamil. This is the struggle of having strong laws and then having them go into application, which is really a different kind of a movement. I'd like to invite Dr. Erin O'Donnell for her to present to us the international context in view of the rights of the river cases around the world, particularly in India and New Zealand. What can you take home, or what can we take home from the Bangladesh experience? Please give us your opinion.
Thank you. And
I mean, you are a good judge of
sorry.
it. You just do it. Sorry.
Excuse me.
All right, let's try that again. So thank you so much for having me here tonight. It's an absolute pleasure to join such a distinguished panel, and I really applaud this effort to bring this judgment to the world. It's a judgment that I've been following very closely. I've had the privilege of working with Mohammed Sohidul Islam, who's just completing his PhD at Melbourne Law School right now, and he is a Bangladeshi water court judge and was able to work with me so that we could write a paper about this case before it was translated in this formal way. But we are so excited to see this come out now and to see everybody be able to engage with this exciting and groundbreaking decision to grant all rivers, as His Honour pointed out earlier, all rivers are now living entities and legal entities in Bangladesh. So I think there's a few points that I think we can draw from the international experience. I'm going to start by acknowledging that I am part of a council that is the voice of a river here in Melbourne in Australia. And this is the Birrarung River, the Yarra River in Melbourne. And this river has been recognised in law as a living entity. It is not a legal entity, so it does not have the full suite of rights that the Bangladesh rivers have, but it does have a voice. And I have the privilege of sitting on that council among many others to represent and to speak for, and importantly, I think, to speak with the river. Sorry, I'm just seeing things up on the screen. One of the really resonating features tonight has been the love for rivers that has come through from advocates and from activists and from really all of the speakers from Bangladesh. This is a very common feature for rivers that have received the status of legal persons or living persons around the world. They are beloved, and that is a driving force for this reform to protect them. But they are almost universally extremely highly impacted. The Wanganui River in Aotearoa, New Zealand is impacted. It's affected by water extraction for hydroelectricity as well as water pollution. The Ganga and Yamuna rivers in India are some of the most polluted rivers, beloved but polluted rivers in the world. The Rio Trato in Colombia has been highly affected by illegal mining along the banks of the river. So this combination of being beloved and yet being highly impacted and in desperate need of protection is a unifying feature that we see in rivers that receive this status. I'd like to also pick up on a point that Rob Hope made at the start of this discussion about rivers having a voice. And that is something that happens when we recognise rivers as legal persons and living persons. It's a profound shift in the way that they're seen in the law and in their relationship to human beings. And it gives rivers a really important voice in speaking up for themselves, in being able to go to court and protect their own interests. But a voice is only useful when it has the power to be heard. And that's where I think we're getting to with this discussion around implementation. If you've got a voice, but you don't have the funding or the organisational capacity or the independence to actually back that up and go to court and to protect your own interests, then what you've got is effectively the appearance of equality or the appearance of power, but no actual change. And I think that's where we're seeing rivers struggle across the globe. They can be formally recognised in law as legal and living persons, but the process to give effect to that is one of long-term change. So if you speak to the Wanganui iwi in Aotearoa, New Zealand, they talk about generational change, and it's an educative process. So the very first river in the world in Ecuador to have its rights respected in court, the Rio Vilcabamba, came about because activists and advocates were educating judges. So they had to do this enormous educative process before they could even get to the point of going to court in the first place. So it's a profound shift. It has the capacity to transform our relations with rivers and to lead, hopefully, to significant changes and vastly improved protections. I think we were all moved by His Honour's really eloquent words about the urgency of protecting rivers in Bangladesh and what has driven him personally to look for these still quite radical solutions. And we do desperately need new ways of thinking and new ways in law to protect rivers. But it needs to be something that brings us together. If we enact legal rights for rivers without civil society, without bringing along communities, then what we can end up with is actually entrenching an adversarial relationship where the rights of the river are seen as in conflict with the rights of people. So instead of that beautiful, intricate, integrated, interrelated relationship between people and rivers, you can see us pulling in different directions and emphasizing the conflict. So there are no easy answers here. I think the international experience is one of persistence and of continued effort to work together to protect the rivers that we all love so dearly.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniel. Achieving this court order has been really, as Rebecca quite rightly puts, a symphony of actions. There's been a profound engagement of public opinion, legal action, the media that triggered the dialogue, and finally having a court order that has become an instrument of great source of confidence and power for an institution like the River Commission, the National River Conservation Commission, and for the ordinary citizens. And never before have people begun to think so much about having legal movements, legal fights to protect rivers. And I see that happening more and more now that we have an order to fall back on. The question that I'd like to now ask all our panelists, here we have the media expert, the man on the ground, the legal expert. Is a court order enough to protect a river? Is having a court order as profound as our court order of 2019, which has already been appealed and soft pedaled, some of its sharpness have been reduced, is a court order enough to protect rivers? I ask the panelists to speak, whoever wishes.
May I?
Yes.
Obviously, the court order is a great, if you like, great source of giving strength, but a judgment is never enough because the judiciary doesn't have the implementation power. It is actually upon the government, but the government can be goaded into action by the media, by civil society, by stakeholders. Unfortunately, in Bangladesh, we had a very vibrant civil society at one stage. Now it is greatly muted. So I think river, well, one of the reasons we are muted is because of the political environment. But I think river can really unite us. It is such an issue that is non-political, it touches everybody, it is like loving your mother. So I think with the judgment giving us the strength, if we can make a concerted effort in Bangladesh, in which the Daily Star will definitely, is willing to play its part. So we take people like Mr. Manzil Murshid, we take persons like you, and try and build a bigger coalition, and raise the issue of saving the river. I think this is the moment to do it. So judgment is very good, but definitely not enough.
Not enough.
Answer,
any further responses?
My answer to this question, Mr. Mahfouz Hanam rightly said, because the judgment when passed, there is no force to implement in the field level. Who will work in the field level? Administration. But what we have got, due to given legal status of all rivers of Bangladesh, the administration has been empowered to save all rivers of Bangladesh. But our work has not been finished yet. Rather, we have to go ahead, and legal fight has to be continued for a long time to achieve our goal and protection of river nature. The main challenge is from the powerful people. Some powerful people who belongs to the government and also member of parliament, they also create a lot of obstruction to achieve the judgment. And already we have filed several contempt petitions to implement the judgment, because normally there is a culture in Bangladesh not to follow the law. This is a very bad culture of our country. So many times when you go to the court to implement the judgment under Article 108 of the Constitution for contempt of court, then there is some result. So by this judgment, we can say that this is a platform from where all of us, we can stand and go proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. Just for your information, 80% of the occupants, the polluters of our rivers are government institutions and government organizations and public representatives. And the commissioner is having a huge challenge in coping with that. Any other responses to that question from the panelists?
There is a specific question for me in the chat box. When you allow, I will answer it.
Sharif,
yes, now's the moment.
We'll switch to moderated questions in a moment. So I'll pass all questions to our chair, and then she'll direct them to you.
Right. So if there are no other comments from the panelists, then shall we move on to the question and answer session? Rebecca?
Yes, please. That would be great.
Okay. So do we have a series of questions which the audience is asking? Sharif Jamil has asked a question. What is your assessment of the ongoing drive to protect the banks of the rivers from illegal encroachers? Has it been effective? How can it be more effective? Dr. M. Sanjeev Hussain, Fellow, Faculty of Law, Oslo University.
Thank you very much for the question. You want me to answer it now or later?
Yeah, I think we should move on because we really are tight on time.
Thank you so much. One positive thing came up from this eviction effort is that people are in general accepting the truth that river cannot be encroached and river needs to be protected. But if you want to ask the question specific for the ongoing eviction drive, we protested it from the very beginning. Because when you do not demarcate the river properly, you cannot list the real encroachers. So if you start the eviction based on a faulty demarcation of pillar, in turns, you are allowing or legalizing a lot of encroachments. That happened for the rivers around Dhaka, and the entire foreshore, bank, and the floodplains for Buriganga, Turag, Balu are now grabbed under the developers or the encroachers. So the point is, if you follow the High Court order in 2009, it chronologically said, first you demarcate the river, then you evict the encroachers, then you put up walkway or greenery as they cannot be again encroached. But if you see the walkway that is under construction and BIWTA is putting up those walkways, you will see they are piling the riverbed to put up the walkways. So when you are putting up the demarcation at the riverbed, you are leaving the foreshore, floodplain, and riverbank at the hand of the grabbers. So this faulty effort of eviction is leading the rivers to be canals. And Bangladesh rivers are not a single flow of water course. It is like interconnected. It is a delta. We are changing the delta character of this land, which will be a very, very disastrous things for the nation in long run.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Sharif Jamil. Can any of our panelists expand on a point that Robert Hope made about producer responsibility? What might this look like? If the state stands as a guardian for the river, how will it stand up to the interests of powerful industries like the garment industry that has connections to global companies and capital? Can any of the panelists respond to that?
Do you want me to respond to that?
If nobody else,
I think Erin is ready to speak.
Erin, yes, go ahead. Erin, please.
Yeah, I think that is a really common challenge for all of these rivers. I think the The most straightforward example is probably the Rio Trato in Colombia, where at least the major impacts to the river are happening through illegal mining operations. So the interests of the government are already on side with shutting those impacts down. But in almost all other cases, you're trying to find a voice for the river and trying to fund it, which means that it almost always needs to be public funding. There are a number of NGOs that are in that space, but it is going to almost always be a government organisation or government funded organisation. So, and I think this is a question probably for the NRCC, is how you set that up to be independent of government. So Australia has experimented with organisations holding water on behalf of the environment, and we've done a lot of thinking about how do you create an organisation that can, whilst still being part of government, have sufficient funding and certainty and enduring nature to persist and to be able to act a little independently of government, enough to hold government to account. But I think the flip side of that is strengthening communities. And this is something that we've seen very strongly in the Birrarung, the Yarra case here in Melbourne, is that the foundation and the legitimacy of the entire collaborative governance arrangement for the Yarra rests on a 50-year community vision that the community came together to try and articulate together. And that can be a powerful tool to hold government to account as well. So I think bringing communities in, NGOs have a huge role in that space, and I'll be really interested to hear what Sharif has to say on that, but also recognising that you have to set up an organisation with independence and funding and an enduring status.
Erin, there's an additional question to you. What lessons and experiences are there from developments to date to put protection and rights of rivers into practice in concrete ways? What are some critical elements? I think you've touched on this. This is from Maureen Harris from International Rivers.
Thank you, Maureen. Look, it's been a real challenge. I think rights for rivers have come about in a number of different ways. And so where they've come about as part of a legislative framework, they have usually been accompanied by the simultaneous creation of the necessary organisations to start giving those rights force and effect. So if we look at the Wanganui example in Aotearoa, when the government passed that legislation recognising the river as a legal person, it also set up all of the new arrangements. So Te Pūtupua, the face of the river, was created and 2 people were appointed to that. A number of different committees were then created to govern the future strategy of the river, and all of the stakeholders were engaged on those committees. So the collaborative governance arrangement was in place from the get-go. The New Zealand government also set aside $80 million to start the implementation process, as well as another $30 million of contestable funding to actually help give effect to all of those new institutions and arrangements. So in that case, I think you've got a comprehensive set of institutional arrangements and the funding that goes with it to actually start progressing the riverine protection. It's still generational change. Māori are still talking about something that's a long-term shift.
This still remains a challenge for Bangladesh. We've got some landmark institutional elements such as the Commission, but we really have a very poor condition in terms of budget and allocations made for that work. There is a question with respect to jurisprudence, and I guess Advocate Murshid could address this. I wanted to know how this larger environment, this is a question from a junior fellow from Observer Research Foundation, Kolkata, India, who says, I wanted to know how this larger environmental jurisprudence taking shape in Bangladesh actually play out in the next decade, considering the fact that the bulk of the water that drains into Bangladesh is essentially transboundary, with India being the upstream riparian. How can hydrodiplomacy act to complement the declaration and enable the NRCC to take care of its mandate? The NRCC, although looks at the national condition and its jurisdiction is limited to the nation, but there can be no doubt about the fact that it's impacted by upstream water flow, and therefore it has to take into account that relationship and that equation. Advocate Manzil Murshid, would you like to respond to this?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's a very important question. You see, mainly river depends on waters. And though there are some countries from where water is coming, China, India, Nepal, so we have a transboundary relationship. So if we cannot solve this transboundary relationship, then we cannot get benefit fully. We cannot save our river. That is the very important question. But Bangladesh government is trying to solve this transboundary problem. Even they are trying to sign a Tista Chukti. But as my understanding, that there is no sufficient support from the Indian side to solve this problem. That's why we have some crisis in these issues. And I think the India and other countries should come forward, even the China, to solve this problem. Otherwise, Bangladesh will face a very big problem to save their rivers, because only if I stop encroach and stop the pollution of water, that is not the final game, because we have to bring the water from the another source, because the top level land where from the water is coming, if there is no free movement or it cannot come to the Bangladesh, then how we can save our river? So that is very important. All the transboundary disputes should be solved, and this should be discussed bilaterally, and it should be solved amicably.
There is a very strong feeling that this should be addressed regionally.
I have some additional things to say here, if you allow.
Sharif, do you want to make a comment on this?
Yes, please.
Okay. Quick one.
To us, the transboundary problem or sharing of water from common rivers are not merely an India-Bangladesh issue. We need to look at it in a different way. The Ganges, Brahmaputra, and Meghna basin are shared by 5 riparian countries. So we need to sit together and we need to take decisions based on the basin-wide management. Secondly, the river does not carry only water. If you see, Bangladesh is already in trouble in terms of land formation. There is subsidence evidence in the coastal region in the country, and due to the climate change and sea level rising, we are more vulnerable because of that. Because upper riparian countries are unilaterally obstacle and putting up barrages and hydroelectric projects in their countries. So they're regulating the water and the common water courses. That has a huge detrimental impact at the downstream. So my first thing is to say we have to ratify the UN Convention on Non-Navigational Water Uses that was introduced in 1996. Bangladesh and India and other countries should ratify it, and then it can be resolved in a very amicable way in a under the legal framework. And second thing, we cannot assume that Bangladesh will not allow Ganges and Brahmaputra to go to the Bay of Bengal through another way. It will go through Bangladesh. So the entire approach we need to revisit. We cannot sustain our nation by cordon approach. The Delta Plan is very good, but the projects on the Delta Plan is changing the delta character of this land. It is not sustainable. We need to go for open approach. We need to ensure the right we have on the common water. Manjil Murshid Bhai said about Tista Treaty, but we do not support this treaty because it did not discuss about the entire resources or water in the Tista Basin. It is only discussing about some water that is after withdrawn by Sikkim or after Ghazal Duba. So we need to consider the entire river system, and we need to consider all riparian countries to come on board on one table.
Right, and this brings home the limitation of such a grand court order such as this, being one element. It can only be one element, and there is a much demand for a regional understanding, regional dialogue, because the rivers run through many nations in for Bangladesh, and the convention, the UN Water Convention, still remains an issue where activists and legal, water experts have been advocating for. Unfortunately, we still haven't gotten there. Rebecca, we have very little time. So what would you like me to do? Go on into asking a few more other questions?
Yes, please. I think we have about seven to 8 more minutes for audience questions.
Okay. Would you like to, just help me sort out an important question, because there are several here. So there is a question from Salwa Haq, New York University, a doctoral candidate. How does this landmark decision of granting rivers legal personhood help rethink the conceptualization of rights, namely property rights and equality, that is intrinsically linked to the philosophical and legal construct of the rule of law of the modern nation state? That is quite a big picture. Who would, is there someone special she has addressed that question to? No. Who would like to answer from the panel?
I can offer
Eric,
some.
please.
So yeah, look, that is a big question. One of the things that I would like to point out is that as a number of countries around the world have recognised rivers as legal persons and living persons, they have not included property rights. So the Wanganui in Aotearoa is as close as it comes to including specific property rights, but it does not include the right to the water in the river. So even there, they are quite constrained. In Colombia, they recognised 4 explicit rights, but they did not recognise property rights. So this intersection of legal personhood and the property rights of rivers has been really unexplored so far. In cases where the rivers are recognised as legal persons, as such, that typically includes property rights. So I think there's some really interesting kind of test cases potentially coming up where rivers start to exert themselves perhaps and try and make use of the rights that have been implicitly given to them. But property has been a real hold point for rivers around the world.
Right.
May I add?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
lot of controversy after this judgment arises because of a legal person and legal entity. You know, normally its meaning is different, but in particularly in respect of river, what does it mean legal entity, legal person? It's not like a human being. But river, what is river? River, there are 4 characters. One is there is a width, there is a flow, there is a water. These 3 things is involved there. So legal person, legal rights, and legal entity is involved. That the flow of the river should continue as it is. There will be no obstruction. Another is width of the river, that will be not enclosed. Another is the water, the main ingredients of the river, that is will stay as it is. So this is the whole things. So if the whole things is remaining as it is, so there will be no encroachment, there will be no destroy of river, there will be no harmful for the river. That is ensure the legal entity and legal rights of the river.
Right. According to the NRCC, the river definition includes the floodplain and the foreshores. So when you define the river, in addition to the 3 elements, we include the foreshore and the river banks, which cannot be occupied, which cannot be owned privately, etc. There's a question here.
Foreshore is including the width.
Includes the width, yes, that's right. There's a question here which seeks to understand. Let me just read out a little bit. From discussions I had when I visited Dhaka previously, I don't think there's a designated regulatory body in Bangladesh focusing on river protections. Having not read the legal outcome in full, I just wanted to know if this judgment will lead to the creation of a regulatory board focusing on water regulations. Thanks. The individual is named Kyle. I'd just like to mention here, being from the River Conservation Commission, that the River Conservation Commission is now considered the regulatory board, because all actions related to the river has now got to be approved by the commission. If you have a project on the river, it has to be approved by the commission. If you want to do some business with the river, you need approval of the river commission. And the river commission is also obliged to monitor water quality and ensure that the laws are abided, the river is not polluted, not occupied, taken over, etc. So in the law actually has, making it the custodian has also made it the regulatory body. There were other regulatory bodies within the water ministry and the shipping ministry, But now it's the job of the River Conservation Commission to coordinate all of that. I don't know whether that answers your question. If any of the panelists wish to add anything, may do so.
Yes,
go ahead,
okay.
go ahead, Monjul bhai.
Okay. The first thing, regulatory authority. You know, before 2009, there were different regulatory authority, BIWTA, Water Board, Deputy Commissioner. But 2009, when the court found that different regulatory system cannot effectively work, that's why the direction was given to form a river commission. And that's why in 2013, the government passed a law in respect of river commission. And after 2013, in 2019, when this judgment was passed, then it was more strengthened. Then it was declared that river commission will be the only controlling authority of river. So now this is the controlling authority, river commission. So there is no other alternative, because this judgment cannot be neglected by anyone, or there cannot be any law passed against the judgment. So now we can say the final regulatory authority is river commission.
That's right.
And
Sharif,
in addition to that,
have a very small comment, just a small
very,
comment,
very
okay?
small, very small.
Yeah.
In addition to that, if you want these things to be meaningful, then you need to reform the River Conservation Commission Act. Because if you do not empower River Conservation Commission to serve their due responsibilities, then it doesn't make any sense. When River Conservation Commission will be waiting for their budget to be approved by a shipping ministry, then it cannot act as an independent body, which will be a violation of the Supreme Court directives. So we wish the holistic approach and the meaningful directives came from the Supreme Court will be meaningfully obliged or meaningfully complied by the government, and they will empower the River Conservation Commission by reforming the Conservation Act and allocating sufficient finance and other organizational capacity. Thank you.
An interesting point made here by, well, the person hasn't given his name. The question is international law ready for this fundamental shift of giving rivers legal personality? What are the impacts of this trend in international law? Can the voice of the river be heard in the international arena as well? Erin, if you'd like to respond to that.
So
can this concept...
Again, it is early days, but there are some really promising signs. So firstly, rights of rivers are being recognised and rights of nature are being recognised around the world. So it is a genuinely transnational movement and a transnational legal reform. So that's a little different to international law, but there is a growing, not consensus, I think we're some way off from that, but there is certainly a growing levels of support for legally recognising rivers in this way. One example I think that is worth acknowledging here in an international legal context is the Minute 314 environmental flow event on the Colorado River, which I think was back in 2016. This was negotiated between the US and Mexico and involved some really detailed negotiations in their treaty governing the way that water is shared between those two countries. And the water was released and connected the delta of the Colorado River to the sea for the first time, I think at that point in like 30 years or something. Like, it was a long time. And for communities along the river, they couldn't remember the last time that the river flowed naturally past their houses and through their villages. So this example, this small example, although not contingent on legal rights for rivers, I think shows that the capacity for NGOs, for communities, to speak at that international level and to influence those international agreements and conversations between states to achieve outcomes for rivers. That gives me hope that the international law, that the international legal community is in fact ready for this kind of still radical legal transformation.
A nation may give a right of the river as a legal entity, but internationally it may not be there. And that would be a bit, difficult to continue, because the river is the same, flowing from one country into another. There is one question a little on another issue. Let me just quickly, Rebecca, do we really have any more time?
We can wrap up if the question can be answered in 1 minute.
Okay. Here's a comment which talks about how Bangladesh government and NGOs together can formulate a remedial action plan to protect the interest of the adversely affected people, especially by river erosion in Bangladesh. In Bangladesh, a huge number of people are dislocated because of the erosion and the floods and inadequate management of our rivers. So is there anyone who would like to make a comment on that, especially on river erosion in Bangladesh? And does anybody want to make a comment on that?
I want to make a comment in 30 seconds, which is we need to change our mindset. We should not go for cordon approach. We should be open approach in terms of managing our rivers and population.
Right. I think in terms of the questions, question answers, we could keep it at this. This can go on. I think that was a wonderful session. Before I give it to Rebecca to conclude it, I'd just like to thank the panelists and this great discussion that we've had. In Bangladesh, the court order definitely has infused new energies into our legal system, into our river institutions, state institutions, and into our public spirit. So therefore, I do see the possibilities of coming together, and that symphony that you talked about, Rebecca, the symphony of actions. I think that Bangladesh is walking very interesting roads, and things are going to happen. And I now hand over this to you, Rebecca, for concluding it.
Thank you so much to our chair, Ms. Sharmeen Murshid, and to each and every one of our panelists. I'm now going to invite Mohammed Ghulam Sawar to say a closing remark before I close out our session.
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for to all the distinguished panelists, Your Excellency, and my boss also, Mr. Mahfouz Alam, who is my boss at the Daily Star also, and other speakers. It was an engaging and lively discussion. I would like to conclude with three particular points. One is we have discussed about the accountability of the implementing stakeholders. The point is we have laws. Our laws have identified the responsibility of the stakeholders, but our laws fail to underscore what actions could be taken if the implementing stakeholder fail to perform their responsibilities. This is number one. Number two is our laws not only fail to take actions against the implementers or against the violators, but also provided some saving clauses that basically provides safeguards to those implementing stakeholders. This is number two. And number three is access to environmental justice is very restricted because our laws have made certain provisions that basically create some difficulties and restrictions for the environmental litigants. So this needs to be addressed. And the third point is with the in line with this discussion, which is in corporate environmental accountability, because our industrialists are definitely contributing to our economy. They are basically exporting clothes, but at the same time, this is very unfortunate that they are also importing pollution to our rivers. So this needs to be addressed through corporate environmental accountability, or what we have discussed, extended producer responsibility, because every product has environmental cost. So this needs to be paid by the industrialists. This needs to be paid through corporate environmental accountability. With this, I'd like to end. Thank you very much for hearing me.
Thank you so much. And may I please extend our sincere thanks to Her Excellency, the High Commissioner of Bangladesh to the UK for joining us today. We so appreciate your thoughtful remarks. We'd like to thank Justice Ashraful Kamal for taking the time to record his remarks to be able to share with you all today. Thanks to Professor Sarwar at University of Dhaka Law Department and to the entire translation team for your tireless work. We'd like to thank our chair, Sharmeen Murshid, and to our wonderful panelists, Sharif Jamil, Erin O'Donnell, Mr. Mahfouz Annam, and Advocate Manzil Murshid for your time today. And of course, thank you to all of our participants for your thoughtful and engaging questions. We look forward to making this recording available to you shortly. And we will also be sending out the translation as soon as it goes live online, and it will be open access available, so anyone with the link will be able to download it and use it going forward. We're anticipating that being ready in the next few weeks. And with that, we ask you to have a wonderful rest of your day. Please stay engaged in this conversation going forward, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you very much. Thank you very much.